will open up an even larger discussion for you guys to have for the rest of the summer. Can he be the type of coach that can overcome the stigmas, the deficiencies, and the things that go on in the front office year to year to year that always make us look at the Eagles like, what are you doing?
But we are lucky enough now to be joined by a guy who, we told him this before, we'll tell him it again. He's got to change the spelling of that first name. Can't be using the G, because if you're going to be a J, an M, you're going to join JM, John McMullen, JM, Jody McDonald. You can be JM, Geoff Mosher. No, he's been G Mosher for a long time, and we're good. Glad to have him aboard. How are you, Geoff?
I'm good. I think I've been called a J.O. before. So
I think we've all been there.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep it at the GM for now.
That's probably that explains a lot, Jeff. Right there.
Well, you know it, Johnny. You know me. Yeah. I didn't say they were wrong. I just said I've been called that before.
And by the way, check out Jeff's podcast, Inside the Birds, InsideTheBirds.com, with also a friend of the show, Adam Kaplan. So want to get that out of the way quickly. But I do want to talk, before you jumped on, Jeff, we were talking about competition, and that's been the mantra of Nick Sirianni. I think it's a little bit overblown. What coach doesn't want competition? I mean, that's common sense. But one thing I did want to pick your brain about is there are mandatory minicamps around this league. Aaron Rodgers is the story because he's not going to show up in Green Bay. Should the Eagles have held the line and said, you know what, this is important for a young coaching staff, rookie head coach, young players development. If certain veterans don't show up, fine, but we need this work. Should they have held the line and just moved forward?
Right. That's a good question. Something Adam and I have talked about a lot, Johnny. And honestly, however you sliced it, I think it was going to be an unideal offseason again for the Eagles. And this one more so because of the new coaching staff and a lot of new players and a new quarterback and everything like that. So if you're Nick Sirianni, you're looking at two different situations, right? You can say, I'm going to kind of put the iron fist down and show everybody who I am, kind of like Andy did early on with the George Hageman and things like that, and say, mandatory means mandatory, so be there. And what would have happened was the whole team would have been there for 3 days or faced fines. And then they probably wouldn't, most of the guys probably wouldn't have showed up for the voluntary stuff. So if I'm a new head coach, do I want to do that and only get 3 days full team where I can do whatever I want? Or do I want to have 2 to 3 weeks to at least have my coaching staff get to know guys, do individual stuff? And I can see the merits of both, but I think for his personality, for who he is, he probably made the right choice in having to negotiate with his team and get them in there, get the learning, get the scheme, get the new playbook down. Maybe if this were a different situation and he wasn't a first-year head coach and didn't have so much newness, I can understand. But I think I can understand in his shoes trading the 3 mandatory days of everybody for having 2 weeks, and then nobody else after that or before that for having 2 to 3 weeks of as many people there as I can get.
Jeff, glad you went there because John and I have had fun with this the last couple of days. Nick Sirianni and how he is being perceived. He is an excitable guy. He's an upbeat kind of guy. And that comes across when he's talking to you guys from the media and when he's working with his players. And they seem to enjoy the camps or gatherings, whatever you want to call them, that the Eagles have put together. John was saying yesterday, he thinks Nick Sirianni is going to be a hit or miss guy. If they come out and they win, that the town and the team and the media could all fall in love with him. But if they come out and go 0-3 or 1-5, that this could be a house of cards, that the whole rah-rah stuff is going to play very poorly for you guys who cover the team and Eagle Nation. You see it the same way, that the start for this upcoming season is going to go a long way in dictating how we think about Nick Sirianni?
From a public standpoint, yes. I mean, and then that's the case with anybody, whether you're a rah-rah or quieter. I mean, Doug Peterson, half the fan base wanted him fired after year 1 because he wasn't, he was too busy loving on players instead of, ruling with an iron fist. So and part of what fed into that is he started off 3-0 and he kind of set unrealistic expectations for how the rest of the season was going to go. And then when they started to lose those games that inevitably they were going to lose, he became a terrible coach and a guy who can't motivate his team and yada, yada. So I worry more about, not worry, but I think more about not how we're going to perceive him, but how the players in the locker room will perceive him after a tough loss. He seems like the perfect coach to have after a nice win, a rah-rah guy. Everybody's in great spirits. But, what happens when you lose at the buzzer on a field goal in Dallas? And how do you, relay that to your team? And then how do you kind of present yourself in the press conference? Are you going to be rah-rah to a bunch of angry Eagles fans who, wanted blood? Sure, that'll matter a little bit as far as perception, but just based on me talking with former players early on in the process about how they felt about the Nick Sirianni press conferences, and they're human beings like us. They were looking at these press conferences, the guys I spoke to, like, this seems interesting and a little weird. He's a little bit of an over-explainer, and then you just wonder how that's going to go over in the locker room, not after the wins, but after the tough losses.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned those press conferences. You're right, Jeff. They don't matter. But, it is something to when you do something different. And, we talk about the competition. We talk about the tetherball. We talk about the backpedal races. And, it's not a typical NFL practice. At least it hasn't been to this point.
Right.
When you do something different, and it goes awry, people tend to pile on. When you do something different and successful, you're innovative, you're great, you're ahead of the curve. So that's more of what I was getting at. Do you see any of that potentially happening, going awry, or you think that's a little bit overblown?
No, that's a good question. I mean, the only person who I can remember, as far as covering the team that did things unconventionally from start to finish was Chip Kelly. And there you saw an example of a guy who it really didn't matter whether winning or losing happened from a player standpoint, because there were certain things that he implemented that were questioned right away. But there are also some things that he did that are still involved with the team today. They were long lasting. They stood the test of time past him. That's the strength and coordination program that he put in, the analytics-based fitness program, the smoothie shakes, the music at practice and things like that. So unfortunately, we have to be in wait and see with Nick Sirianni as far as, is he just a rah-rah guy, or is there a science, or is there a substance behind what he's doing that is going to make sense when all is said and done? And again, does this help him relate to his players to enable him to become the best coach that he can be? I feel like there's some Pete Carroll in him just from a personality standpoint, but Pete Carroll won right away. And he has stood the test of time with his coaching, although you can question some of his philosophies. He's done a great job. We'll have to see with Nick Sirianni if this is more pomp and circumstance or if there's a whole lot of substance behind what he's implementing here.
All right, Jeff. I checked your Twitter during the show. I've been talking to McMullen here, and neither one of you guys has reported that Zach Ertz has been traded yet today. So it's another day that Zach Ertz is still here as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. These next, how many weeks till camp opens up? 6 or 7, somewhere there. I don't know the exact number.
July 27th. So you can do
that's
the math.
Close to 7 weeks, as a matter of fact. Nothing's happening. No one is trimming their cap to be able to fit Zach Ertz in. No one's going to get hurt. This last week, there's a couple teams like Green Bay, mandatory minicamp. I guess a tight end could blow out his knee in a tetherball competition, which could make him more viable to trade. But it's highly unlikely any of that's going to happen. So how do these next 7 weeks play? Are Howie Roseman and Zach Ertz and his agent continue to play chicken and just stare at each other, or is something going to get done?
Well, at some point, I think that there'll probably be, whatever has taken place between Howie Roseman and his agent, it's probably going to ratchet up in the next few weeks. I think you make an interesting point about nobody getting hurt here in mini camps, and you're right, because the only reason I can see them holding on to Zach Ertz right now is for them to see if somebody gets hurt in training camp, and all of a sudden a desperate team the Colts or somebody who could use a tight end.
So in other words, this is going 9 more weeks. Forget the 7 weeks to get to camp. You're telling me it's 9 more weeks before something actually gets done.
To me, that would have to be the only reason, because I cannot buy that they're hanging on to him and they're going to keep him on the roster and then get a compensatory pick when he leaves at the end of the year. Because does that mean you're going to play him? Because I can't imagine that you're in discussions right now on a contract extension with Dallas Goedert, and you're still going to bring back Zach Ertz. Because if you bring back Zach Ertz, you can't just not play him. You have to be a 2 tight end offense, which is not what they want to be. They've invested now in wideouts, and in general, I think the owner wants an explosive offense, and you can't really be that way with 2 tight ends. And he's a guy who's in the last year of his deal. There's no sense, both philosophically or economically, to have Zach Ertz on your roster. You can cut him right now and not owe him a single cent and clear up that cap space. So the only reason they'll have him on your roster right now is because you think you're getting something in return. But the league has already told you by now you're not getting anything in return. The other teams don't want to take him on for $8.5 million, and he doesn't appear. I don't know, if he said it or not. But I mean, you would think that if he really wanted to get out of there, he would either take a pay cut or restructure his deal. But that hasn't happened. So it's a standoff right now, and the Eagles aren't blinking. But I don't see how this benefits them in any way unless they're able to trade him because another tight end from another team gets hurt.
It's just this Howie being hard-headed, Jeff, and the fact that he wants to win every trade, holding on for the dear life for the very end. Because you bring up the point, Nick Sirianni doesn't even want to run 2 tight ends. He wants 3 receivers on the field. Jeffrey Lurie wants 3 receivers on the field. Oh, by the way, Doug Peterson wanted 3 receivers on the field. But Doug was smart enough to know that, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert are just better than my receivers.
Right.
If Nick Sirianni goes to training camp, he's going to have to admit to himself, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz are better than my receivers. We'll put Devontae Smith aside. Right. So why do they even want that headache?
I don't know. I mean, they just went through this last year with Alshon Jeffrey, a guy that they didn't want to have on the roster but had to because he was hurt in the offseason, and they couldn't trade him. They couldn't cut him then without paying him the full money for him not to be on the team. And as soon as he got healthy, they felt the temptation to play him. And look what that did to Travis Fulgham. Look what that just did in general. I mean, it looked awkward for a team that terrible to be playing a 30-some-odd-year-old receiver coming off of an injury who they weren't even going to be able to trade because of anything that he did last year. So to me, you face a little bit of the same situation with Zach Ertz. If he's on the roster making that money, you're going to feel compelled to play him. And you're trying right now to feature Dallas Goedert as your number 1 tight end. And that's going to take away from him. It's going to take away from the receivers we talked about. So yes, I see the hard-headedness of this that you're referring to, John. However, if somebody does get hurt, I mean, this team has had that gem happen to them before, usually a quarterback, and they're able to trade Ertz and get a 3rd or a 4th or something like that, then he's going to look like a genius.
Jeff, I want your take on this, because I think John and I see this a little bit differently, but maybe John's just playing devil's advocate.
No, I wouldn't trade Ben Simmons.
No.
Oh, my bad.
Not where I was going, but okay. Not surprising you went there.
I would for Lillard, though, but go ahead.
Maybe it's in my DNA and my genes. I'm a blood and guts, results-oriented kind of relate to the general manager kind of guy, because my father did it way back when. I don't believe in owing players something. There was a time, I'm old enough to remember, when, yes, there were ties between players and organizations. I just don't think that exists the way that it used to. It barely exists at all. And John has suggested, because Zach Ertz is arguably the greatest tight end in the history of the Eagles franchise and was a contributor to a championship team, that the Eagles kind of owe Zach Ertz. I don't think they owe him anything. The Eagles don't owe Zach Ertz, and Zach Ertz doesn't owe the Philadelphia Eagles. It cuts the same both ways, and I don't think loyalty is part of it either way anymore. Well, do you think that is still part of it? Do you think the Eagles have to take that into consideration, or is it just, hey, business is business?
Let me meet you guys both halfway on this. I agree with you to an extent, Jody, that business is business, but I also think that you can be a team. I think taking care of your players the right way goes a long way in sports. If you're known as a team that does take care of your players, you're a more attractive place for good players to want to come to. There are certain teams that have reputations, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, of and certain owners who have reputations of not taking care of their players very well, and they suffer as a result. But in this specific case, remember that Zach Ertz has restructured his deal, I believe, 4 times. And sometimes when you restructure and push that money down the road, you wind up in a situation like this where you want out, but because you restructured and have this money down, it's harder for you to get out, right? And the team acknowledges it wants out too, but it has the control to hold over you. Now, he didn't have to restructure his contract 4 times, and he did it under the premise that if something happens down the road, you're going to take care of me the way I'm taking care of you right now. Okay, so that's where I feel like business is business, but and you could say, well, Zach, you were the naive one to restructure 4 times, but you do kind of expect that if you're going to help the team out, they're going to help you out a little bit, and it doesn't feel like there's been a mutual process here of treating each other correctly. It seems like Zach's the one who's made more of the sacrifice than the Eagles in this case.
Now, Geoff, want to add some context to that. Go back to the Seattle playoff game as well, where Zach plays with the fractured rib, plays with the lacerated kidney, shouldn't have been on the field, does it for this organization. So my point would be more of other players see that. Other players see what Zach Ertz did for the organization. They know what he did contract-wise, as you pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is more, can that affect the other players in the locker room saying, okay, they're doing Zach Ertz dirty, so why aren't they going to do me dirty down the road? Can that seep into some thinking?
It could. Now, does that stuff go away when a team wins? Yeah. Sure, because you can turn over. I mean, I remember in the early 2000s, every single Eagle who did an extension after 2 years was mad 2 years later when the market was reset and they were making lower, and they all complained about it in some form or fashion. And it didn't seem to hurt the Eagles' reputation. It certainly didn't do anything to Andy Reid's reputation. It just hurt Joe Banner's reputation. And so the coach always winds up getting off scot-free. And when you're a winning coach like Andy, players want to play for you. They don't say, I'm going to sign with the Eagles to play for Joe Banner or Jeffrey Lurie. So that goes back to our conversation about how good of a coach Nick Sirianni can be. Can he be the type of coach, and this will open up an even larger discussion for you guys to have for the rest of the summer, can he be the type of coach that can overcome the stigmas, the deficiencies, and the things that go on in the front office year to year to year that always make us look at the Eagles like, what are you doing? Like go look at the last 18 months. I mean, people are feeling more positive now. And you notice how revisionist historians kind of forget about what happened over the last 15, 16 months because they're all enamored with the newness. But this team every 3 to 5 years seems to go through a cycle of dysfunction. And there's a reason for that, right? So good coaches like Andy and to some extent Doug, until it caught up to him, have been able to overcome that. But you just wonder how many times they can keep doing that.
Geoff, if Zach Ertz becoming an ex-Eagle isn't the thing that Eagle fans are most tired waiting on, well, then that would be who is actually going to be the starting cornerback across from Darius Slay, who is going to be CB2 here on the Philadelphia Eagles, because my partner Johnny Mack continues to assure me that person is not in Philadelphia just yet. At some point, he's coming in from the outside, and we continue to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait to find out who that is, either free agents that are left who are getting smaller and smaller and smaller a group as we go along, and or a potential Howie Roseman trade. When actually are we going to find out that, oh, no, it's going to be Michael Jacquet. He's going to start across. When is that going to happen?
Well, if it's going to be Michael Jacquet, you might as well not have your expectations very high for the Eagles defense this year. I don't know when it's going to happen. I do think I agree with John. I think there will be movement. You remember, 2017. Now, granted, totally different situation, but they traded for Ronald Darby like 3 weeks into training camp. So I would say there's not a rush, but I know what the reality is, and fans want to know exactly now. But the point is that the season doesn't start until September. There's always ways to get a guy, but I think it would be smart for them with a new defense to kind of get a guy as soon as they can, but they're not going to overpay. They're not going to sit there and pay Steven Nelson $6 million just because he's out there and they need a cornerback. That's not. If you look at all their moves this offseason, most of them have been, we'll get a guy at a bargain deal. You get a guy like Ryan Kerrigan, you only have to pay $2.5 million. That's a bargain deal. So they're not going to overpay for Steven Nelson, who I think probably has a higher opinion of himself financially than the rest of the league. And we'll see what happens with his deal. There are some other names out there. And then, of course, there's the veteran cut downs. Now, remember, there's more cut down days this year, right? They went back to the old style of having 2, 3, or 4 styles of cuts, and I'm sure the Eagles will monitor that too. But the fans want to know who this guy is, and I keep saying, no matter who it's going to be, it's very doubtful this guy's going to be a game changer. Even if it's Steven Nelson, if quarterbacks decide that Darius Slay is looking like the real Darius Slay and they want to go throw at Steven Nelson, I'm not expecting Steven Nelson to be a shutdown corner on that side. So, I mean, there's a reason why he's unemployed this late into the year. So no matter who you get.
Yeah, how about a 4th-round pick, Geoff? Zach McPherson. I do want to talk about competition because, Nick brings it up all the time, but we all know that's not true. Fletcher Cox isn't competing, Brandon Graham, so forth and so on. Left tackle, cornerback, Zach McPherson, running back 2. Anywhere else you see that is true competitions?
I mean, I'm sorry, you said left tackle, cornerback, and where?
Running back, backup running back to Miles Sanders.
That's a good one. RB2 is good, cornerback. I can't imagine there's competition per se at safety, but if Rodney McLeod can't go or if starts to show real decline, I mean, you've got some interesting safety options there, including, Kevon Wallace being a second-year guy. Slot receiver is going to be pretty interesting because I know they're going to move guys around and they have a chance to be more explosive. From the interior receiver, if Greg Ward's off the field and say Jalen Reagor.
Don't say that, Jeff. Jody is going to get upset if you say Greg Ward's not going to be on the field.
Another Greg Ward hater. All right, that's fine. Mosher, join
not a hater. I just know how.
I'm out there on the island by myself. The misfit toys. Me and Greg Ward. We're perfectly fine. Thank you very much.
Hey, that's okay. You know what? He's proved a lot. He's already overcome a lot. So
yeah. They want to get better at the position, but we'll start at left tackle, Jeff. Jordan Mailata versus Andre Dillard. I think I'm in the minority. I think if Andre Dillard is telling me the truth, and he told me he's gotten a lot stronger, and if he can handle the bull rush, he's going to be the Eagles' starting left tackle.
Wow. I mean, certainly that was his big bugaboo as a left tackle, that toughness, that bull rush. And then the weight that he needed to put on, which apparently he has. So if I would agree, if he's checking off every single box, then he probably has as much upside, if not more, than Jordan Mailata. But I think it'll be difficult to unseat him because Mailata already has that part of his game.
He does.
And if he can improve just a little bit, I think he has smaller steps to go to reach his fullest potential than Andre Dillard. So that's why I would put Mailata as the lead horse right now. But I can certainly see a scenario where things change if Andre Dillard really makes the big jump or bridges the huge gap right now that he needs to become an elite left tackle.
Let me throw a monkey wrench into the whole left tackle conversation. And again, the hypothetical. We do this all the time here on the show. I do it all the time on my radio shows too. And some people hate it and I love it. Sorry. I apologize to those of you who hate hypotheticals. And this one is a little far-fetched, but not 100% far-fetched. Let's say Landon Dickerson, because he doesn't get his contract done for another couple weeks, and I get to bust Johnny Shops about the fact that he's the only unsigned draft pick, he comes in with a chip on his shoulder, and he's ready to play. Granted, they're not doing anything in these competitions that they're doing, but when camp actually opens up, not only does he go out there and work, he goes out there and dominates. And he is showing to be the best offensive lineman on this team. Whose job is in jeopardy?
Wow, that is the king of hypotheticals right there.
Yeah, I told you I was pushing the envelope ahead of time.
He just had ACL surgery in late December.
Come on.
I mean,
he's a beast. Have you seen this guy? He's an animal. He's coming to compete. He's going to take the coach at his word. It's a competition. And he shows up in camp ready to compete. And he's the best
Yeah,
offensive lineman in
he
camp.
won't be cleared to practice.
Well, that's what I was just about to get at. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the king hypothetical because we have no idea if his health makes him ready.
Yeah.
But in your hypothetical situation, it's not uncommon for a guy who shows the talent to still have to kind of wait it out. And it usually doesn't take long. I mean, not that this is similar, but Isaac Seumalo lasted all of two weeks in 2017 before they put Steph Wisniewski in, right? So there's going to be somebody who gives up a sack or somebody who gets hurt or somebody who stubs their toe that would clear the case for Landon Dickerson. I think the bigger question is with him is he's been kind of billed as Jason Kelce's successor because we know it's probably Kelce's last year. But the way this guy is so monstrous, like a center is a helping position, right? You're either going to help your right guard, help your left guard. So every once in a while when the blitz is coming, it's 5-man, you got to take a guy on yourself. But he's so monstrous. Like I can't get past my head what a combo block between him and Mailata would look like with at 350 or him and Dillard, a different Dillard on some 3 technique driving him back. So I almost wonder if it's Seumalo who's going to eventually move to center and Dickerson's going to be one of your big mauling guards, your Quentin Nelson-like kind of guards, although not as athletic, but still a mauler in the sense. So it'll be more interesting to see where he gets on the field than when he gets on the field because, Jody, with injuries, especially with this team, he'll get on the field when he's ready. Yeah.
That is true. Injuries and, post 30 players, they don't tend to get healthy all of a sudden after having those injuries year after year after year. So it's right to be concerned about Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks. But I do want to put your Jonathan Gannon hat on and go back to cornerback, Jeff, because if I'm not getting a corner, I can't get Steven Nelson. I can't make a trade in August. And I force you to put out 3 cornerbacks from the current roster. How are you doing it? Avonte Maddox just outside to start, kick him inside? Are you putting Zach McPherson on the field? Are you throwing Mike Jacquet to the Wolves? How do you do it?
Oh man, can you in this king hypothetical? Can you give me your feeling on how Josiah Scott's playing?
Well, the thing is, can you put Josiah Scott in the nickel? Can you put Avonte Maddox outside? They're both clones of each other. They're both, Julio Jones is out there, Mike Evans, all the, who thankfully he's not going to be in Atlanta week 1. But you know how many monstrous receivers there are.
Yeah.
Take Josiah Scott or Avonte Maddox. Can you put any of them outside?
Well, I think if you're Jonathan Gannon and you're being honest with yourself and you know that your defense has a ways to go from where it needs to be, and when I say a ways to go, it's not going to be this year. I don't see anything wrong with a little bit of juxtaposing guys, and situationally. In fact, Jim Schwartz did that, 2016 or 17 when Darby got hurt. You remember he would play Jalen Mills. He would play Jalen Watkins, was it? The kid from Florida that Watkins, came up. Yeah, he wound up kind of and Rasul Douglas. He would wind up playing these guys in different times just to kind of get a look on how they would be in certain situations. And so if that's the case, right, I think you got to probably look at playing some situational football in that you would probably start with either Maddox or Scott, because as you mentioned, they're clones, as your outside corner in rundowns, and then move one of them inside, and then maybe bring in a McPherson or whomever to play the outside in pass downs, or you just you don't want to telegraph, so you might have to mix it up a little bit. But I think there's an opportunity then to get McPherson on the field and see what he's got without just throwing him to the wolves and saying you're playing every snap opposite Darius Slay.
Moshe, if hypotheticals aren't my favorite question, this one is, and I'll make it my last one to you. Give me the percentage that question.
Okay.
Starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2022. The percentage that his name is Jalen Hurts. At this time, what kind of percentage would you stick on that?
I'm going to give you a Chip Kelly answer. 50%. He either is or he either isn't.
Oh, nice dodge.
Hold on. Let me get my abacus to try to figure out the percentage there. Look, I mean, I think there's a I'll answer your question the best I can. And I think there's a difficulty. It sounds fine in theory that you hear people say, hey, give him a year, see what he's got. But I can think of a lot of quarterbacks who, improved after a rough year, or, we're really good in one year and then kind of regress to the mean the next year. So I almost think that when you say I give a guy a year to see how he is, it's not fair. And to be honest with you, it's really not. This is not a team that is could be built to succeed around him. If you get injuries at offensive line and wide receiver, are you going to blame everything on Jalen Hurts? So the fact that he kind of gets this quote unquote year to me means that he's got to be either really, really good despite no matter what happens around him, or they're going to use those first round picks to bring in somebody either in the draft or via trade. So I would actually handicap it more that he's not the quarterback in 2022 than he is. But obviously, if he plays great or even really, really good, and you think there's a foundation to build on, that'll help his case.
Yeah, and that's you put it out brilliantly, Jeff. That's the reason it's not 50-50. I would put it at 25%. It's not fair. I say all the time, what can Jalen Hurts do to win this job? And then you say, if Deshaun Watson is available, if Aaron Rodgers is out there, which is unlikely, but Russell Wilson, whomever, and then you talk about the draft and everybody who does mock drafts. We just had Rick Saratella on before you came on. They all had the Eagles taking a quarterback. Nobody believes in Jalen Hurts. How fair can this be? It's not fair.
It isn't. It's strange. The whole scenario surrounding it is strange. I mean, he was a second-round pick because the Eagles made him a second-round pick. Yeah. The NFL felt that he was a 3 or early 4 type of guy. And even if you look at the history of second-round picks in the NFL over the last 10 years, there are some successful ones. Carr out in Oakland was a second-round pick. Colin Kaepernick was a second-round pick. But then I can throw like the Geno Smiths. I can throw the Drew Locks at you. I can throw the Deshaun Kaisers. I mean, honestly, there's more failures as second-round pick quarterbacks than there are really good success stories. That has nothing to do with Jalen. It doesn't mean anything either way. I'm just giving you what the statistical percentages say of this guy's, chances of being a long-term starter in the league are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll throw Drew Brees in there too as a second-round pick.
I said 10 years. I said last 10 years, not 100
years ago.
Yeah, but Drew Brees just retired, so someone has to step up and take the Drew Brees second-round mantle. And I'm suggesting that it could be Jalen Hurts. Maybe I'm got to take the eagle-colored glasses off, but what can I tell you? Moshe, always a pleasure, bud. Appreciate you coming on board. InsideTheEagles.com, Inside the Eagles Pod.
Inside the Birds, buddy.
Inside the Birds.
Just making sure.
What I say?
You said
Inside
Eagles.
The Eagles.
That would be copyright infringement. I don't want to get involved with trademark infringement.
Inside the Birds podcast at InsideTheBirds.com. Thank you for correcting me.
No problem.
Moshe, a pleasure, buddy. We'll get you on again soon enough. Appreciate you doing it for us today.
Always good, fellas. Have a great one.
Geoff Mosher here with us on, what do we call this show? Oh, Birds 365. That's right. Yeah. Kind of got to get the names of the shows right if you're going to do it. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald coming back, putting a bow on the show for you next. Stick around.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.